Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very first Direct from the Field webinar. We are so glad that you're here. We've got an intimate little group today, but we think that's just perfect. Agros is very much a family organization, and it makes perfect sense that we would have just a little family here to enjoy. We are, as I said, thrilled to be able to broadcast this webinar out. Since many of you, I know we have a few from California here, and some of you aren't able to make our very early morning Direct from the Field webinar, or sorry, our Direct from the Field events in person. So the idea today is just to get you in touch with what's happening on the ground at Agros and hear your questions. Hopefully you'll learn a little bit today, and we're just glad you're here. So right now I have everyone muted, and I am able to unmute you as we go if we have any questions. Yep, that makes sense. What we're going to do first here is start with some introductions, and one more logistical thing is if you do have questions as we go, feel free to type them into the chat. We can see those there, and if it makes sense, we're happy to address those questions in between presenters. Otherwise, we'll hold those until the end. We're going to talk for about 30 minutes first and then do a Q&A. And at this point, let's jump right into introductions. I am Anna Lane, and just to give you a face to go with the voice you'll be hearing today, here I am in country. People like to comment on how big my smile is there, and of course it is because I'm so happy I'm in Nicaragua. I'm the new marketing and communications manager here, so I've only been here about 7 months, but I've had the privilege of traveling to 6 Agros communities, so I really jumped in feet first. And I'm just honored to be part of this organization. Today we'll also have presenting Don Hagen. Don is part of our board, and Don has graciously jumped in last minute to frame up our conversation and introduce you to the regional project, which is what we're all really excited about right now happening in Nicaragua. Dawn has been a supporter of Agros for 5 years and is incredibly generous with her time and resources, so we're excited to have her.
She's on the left.
I will jump in. Oh, and it was mentioned, apologies, we'll slide back a second. Dawn is the one on the left there, in case you're curious of the three. We also have with us today for presenters Geoff Piper. Geoff is one of the founding partners of the Global Studio, which is a local architectural firm. It's the nonprofit half of 5 Dot Design, and they help out nonprofits like us with international infrastructure. And so what Geoff has been doing is helping us, specifically he'll talk about the community design process and how we have really involved families in the design of their own community to an extent that we have never reached before. So it's pretty exciting to hear about. Finally, we also have Karen Weber with us in the room, and Karen Weber is the spouse of Mark Weber, one of our board members. They have been supporters of Agros for 16 years. And they're also really fantastic advocates and fundraisers for Agros, hosting events and getting all of their friends involved in the work that they're so passionate about. We also have in the room, I don't have slides for, Andrea John Smith. She's our interim director of development, super passionate about Agros and might jump in from time to time with questions. We also have Farlis Lewis in the room. And Farlis is part of our program staff, so she's going to be the expert. If your questions get technical at all, we'll definitely call Farlis in. So at this point, I would like to jump right into the presentation, and Dawn is actually calling in. So what I'm going to do is unmute Dawn and shift over to her slides, and we'll jump right in. Let me unmute Dawn right here, and we'll see how this works. Dawn, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hello.
I was sort of hoping that you wouldn't say which one I was on that slide because it's such a bad picture. I was sort of hoping that the assumption would be that I would be one of the other ones. Fine, whatever. Thanks for finding that photo on the fly. I'm sure you had about 5 minutes to do that. So thanks Thanks for the introduction. Hello, everyone. It's a delight to be here and to talk to you about Agros. It's just one of my most favorite topics. I can't guarantee that I will follow the slides specifically, but I will do my best to kind of set this up in a way that makes sense for the rest of the conversation. But I thought I would just start by sharing with you kind of what got me into supporting Agros and dedicating a lot of my time and you know, just dragging other people into helping with Agros as much as they can, because I think it's an organization, and I know I'm preaching to the choir a bit here, as it were, but it's hard not to feel passionate about Agros. But what personally got me is I come from my heart is very service. My head is very business. And I think what got me about Agros is that it really, when I first heard about the model, I just had never heard anything like it. I had never heard about an organization that really, gosh, it struck me as fearless. For me, it's fearless for an organization to just say, we are going to look at not just poverty, but generational poverty, and not just one aspect of it. We are not going to talk about clean water only. We're not going to talk about nutritional health. We're not only going to talk about land rights and agriculture or community building. Poverty is super complex, and bring it. We're ready. We're gonna deal with it in its complexity and in its and we're going to deal with it in a very personal way. And I think what's beautiful about the founding of Agros is that this began 30 years ago, because Skip Lee said yes. He said yes to a calling, and he started this organization in the middle of a civil war in Guatemala, and it evolved over time. And I think, you know, it's just such a wonderful place to be at with Agros. Looking back, we just celebrated last year our 30-year anniversary, and to be able to stand at that milestone and just see the progression as we've continued to grow and evolve over time, that you start to see how we're building on this work and just continuing the growth. So I think what you'll hear today is you'll hear an evolution. You'll hear about the evolution of our model, but very true to sort of where we started. So I think I'm going to use the word that's on this slide, but it has been very much a continuum. It is a very, you know, it's easy to look back and see the road that is leading us here. And then I think, you know, that picture in the middle, it really, at the heart, I hear this, it's probably the thing I hear most when I talk about Agros, is that it's about relationships. But sorry, I'll go on to the continuum slide there and talk about that. Anna, if you want to flip forward.
Gotcha. This one?
Great. So this, in essence, is the continuum that we're talking about. This is a simplified version of it. But, you know, what we've kind of come to think of as the 3 generations of Agros, and we're not done, right? But the generation 1, you know, we really honed our work and our model in a village by village basis, working with individual families of about 25 to 50 families in a village. And we evolved our model as we learned more about the lives and really the levers of poverty and what it takes to really shift over time generational poverty. And I'll just say that here too as well, is that I was just talking to someone who runs a global NGO that deals with poverty and generational poverty, and he said he had never seen anything like this, that what he loved about the Agros model was not just its holistic view, but just that it was not a quick fix. It wasn't looking at a single solution and stepping in and out of lives, but really walking with people as they healed and built a future for their family. And moving on to sort of what we've called Wave 2, which was our Generation 2, which is Tierra Nueva. And those of you who've been walking with us for a while are familiar with this village. And it was what I consider sort of a proof of concept of this regional project that we're going to talk about today. We put an enormous amount of resources into this village, and we really put our best practices to date into establishing a solid foundation for these families. And what we learned when we did it in a more thoughtful way and leveraging all the learning we've had to date is that we learned that we had a halo effect. We would move into these regions, and others around the area would benefit, because if we built a road, others could use that road. If we brought in clean water, others benefited from that clean water. When we built market connections and market relationships, both locally and internationally, for people's agriculture, others in the region benefited from that, as well as schools, community development, relationships. So agricultural training, we opened up those aspects of our model to folks in the region. And what you do when you do that is you start to see a lift in the entire region, even those families that are not specifically within the boundaries and confines of I'm using air quotes here, you can't see it, but the Agros village. So that's kind of where we came to. And then Generation 3 is what we're going to talk about today, which is this, taking that idea, taking the model, doing a lot of research and a lot of work about scaling it, how to scale that with thought and with care, keeping intact the heart of relationship, but being very, very smart and rigorous about how we apply that model to a much broader set of families. We're talking 800 families that we could potentially sort of lift out of generational poverty and transform. And I think when you look at the far left, 25 families to, touching potentially 800 plus families, it's really staggering when you think back 30 years ago to Skip Lee saying yes in the midst of a civil war in Guatemala. So that's just something I find very humbling and exciting at the same time. So I need to see where we're going. Yes, so back to relationships. We can skip past that. I think I touched on that. And I think I love this. I love this piece that it is, on this slide, a full third of this slide, because not long after I joined the board, and I should back up for a second and say I joined the board about 2.5 years ago. I've been supporting Agros for a while, doing various pro bono projects with them. Not long after I joined the board, I was asked to accompany the CEO of Agros and a fellow board member named Bruce Andrews, who was the previous Secretary of Agriculture in Oregon. We were invited to travel down to Nicaragua, and we were able to observe and be a part of, I think, a 4-day session. And that 4-day session is where if I was in love with Agros before, I was intrigued and just filled with respect and confidence after this opportunity, because what I learned about Agros in that hotel in Nicaragua was that we are very much a learning organization, and that we are taking our work and our accountability to our stakeholders so seriously that we are employing and engaging the best minds in the world to think about and help us scale our work and do our work the best we can, and to serve our beneficiaries in the best way we possibly can, and to do it intelligently and in a way that it does only good and no harm. And that means being vulnerable and learning And so what that meant in that case is that we opened up our model for review to 5 different globally leading organizations that came together at that time, and they'd been working individually, and you're actually going to hear later from one of those organizations that was present at the meeting that I was able to participate in. And they had been working and researching and sort of just looking under the hood of our model and seeing what we'd been doing well, what we hadn't been doing well, had been looking around at global best practices and thinking truly innovatively about how we can do what we do better. And they all came together, and it was their first time, after working individually for months, the first time of sort of comparing notes. And it was a room filled with ideas and challenge and learning and humility and excitement. And the result of that work was the commitment to develop field manuals. And I think you'll hear a little bit about that later, but really applying not only rigor to how we go into a village, but also about how we measure our success and ensure that we are directionally moving in the right way and that we're learning as we go forward. So just continuing to feed that learning back into our model so that we get even better. And you know, things, very detailed things. We had a health expert there that talked to us about some cultural issues around protein consumption during pregnancy and some of the stigma around some of that was causing some nutritional issues with maternity health. How do we deal with that? How do we change those cultural norms? Talking about the fact that in our attempt to be sort of egalitarian and we would go into villages with 25 families and we would parcel up the land evenly because we wanted it to feel even. And what we learned in that was that in doing that, as well-intended as it was, we were unintentionally, one of our unintended consequences was that we were burdening families with more than they could handle. So if you have a smaller family, or if your children are so small they're not able to participate, or you have your spouse who isn't physically able to help in the way that other families are, you know, is giving that family the same amount of land really the best thing? So we had this amazing session, and out of that came some really robust thinking and learning. And I'm sorry, I can't see the next slide. Oh, great. So, so we then, armed with this information and with best practices and informed by some really wonderful partners who were going to participate and offer their expertise, making our sort of holistic model even better, we went in search of land. And we found it was difficult. I think you're going to hear about that a little bit too, because the rigor and the criteria we used for purchasing the land was so high. It wasn't anything like what we'd done in the past. And so it took us a while to find the land, but we finally found a region that that really spoke to our that met our criteria, and that is this region here. And I think that you know, I'll just say now that the board went down, I think, gosh, Karen, maybe a month ago or so. Yeah, almost. And we were able to be on site at the groundbreaking for our new regional village. And rarely have I been so humbled and excited to be at the beginning of a journey than I was sitting on that land breaking bread with the families who are trusting Agros with their future. And the hope and the dreams that I heard about that day will stay with me forever. They will stay with me forever. So looking at this map, we are in the, our village spans a large amount of land, and the primary villages will be in the dots you see at Aguas Vivas, and then up on the top of the slide, El Ejoche. So then the regional benefits and the halo effect that you'll see will sort of bridge the two of those areas. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong in this, I believe that they're a couple hours apart from one another.
Plus, I think about 40 minutes.
That was just
40 minutes. Okay, right. So, so definitely connected and within distance of one another, and able to share the benefits of that region. And I just can't say enough about how it feels to see this come to fruition in terms of watching all of this work and due diligence come to life, and then connecting it with the actual faces and families that are going to be our partners, you know, for the next 7 to 10 years as we walk together this journey. And so that's just something that is, you know, I think is something that I encourage each of you to do if you haven't had the chance.
Dawn, I'm actually
and
going
I think the next slide really talks about, you know, Skip's vision, taking it from 30 years ago in Guatemala to sort of some of the evolutionary pieces that we're really starting to see greater impact from. And that for us is really, that's where it gets exciting for us, is taking this amazing familial relationship-based model and keeping that heart and scaling it even larger. And I think you'll see some of the greater rigor applied to our land selection. We talked about that, the field manuals, which are strengthening, and we have partners in collaborating and bringing global best practices into that, monitoring and evaluation, which is increasing accountability on our own parts, really, about the work we're doing, and making sure that we are being intelligent and applying best practice where we can, and then measuring those results, and never losing sight of developing communities and relationships, and keeping that string of community planning running throughout, so that we're building relationships as we're building stability.
Dawn, thank you. A big round of applause to Dawn for jumping in off the cuff and doing a fantastic job of introducing us all to the regional project. This next slide, I'm going to say, is for me. I wanted to throw it in. This is one of my favorite families from the regional project that I actually got to meet while I was there. These are Ephraim and Orbelinda's 4 children, and they are exactly the people that are going to benefit from everything Dawn just said. So this is the human and relational side of all of those wonderful improvements that we've been talking about. Next, I'm going to hand things off to Geoff Piper and let him tell you a little bit more about himself before he digs into some of the really cool stuff that he led just a couple months ago in Nicaragua.
All right. My name is Geoff Piper with the Global Studio, and we've had the pleasure of working with Agros for the last 9, almost 10 years now. We are an architecture and consulting firm here in Seattle, and while this isn't the typical architecture thing, it's definitely the favorite thing we do in our office. It's not only rewarding, but it's extremely fun. We have a great time working directly with the villagers, working with the great staff at Agros here in Seattle, and working with the wonderful staff down in Nicaragua in the La Dalia office. Dawn mentioned the complexity of the work that Agros does, and that's one of the things that really draws us to this work. A lot of nonprofits tackle one issue. Agros tackles a lot of issues in an effort to get at a deeper, more comprehensive solution. And as architects and designers, that's something that we're drawn to. We consistently work in projects that have many people, many factors involved, and we see these solutions working well when we go down and visit these villages. So we started in 2006 with Eliden, and we worked on 4 villages so far. These 2 will be take it up to 6. We've also had the pleasure of working with them on their capacity development project. Don mentioned all the different consultants coming together to kind of look under the hood. Our area was the human habitation and infrastructure area, and as part of that, we developed a site selection manual that was put together to help Agros buy good dirt, right, when it comes right down to it. What is a rigorous method for analyzing the property that you're looking at? How do you make sure that it's going to meet the needs of the villagers who are going to move on to it? And how do you make sure that you can coordinate all the different things that you're going to have to do to turn a cattle farm into a village for 300 people? So El Ajoche and Agros Vivas are the first 2 projects that are going to be using kind of the new methodologies and tools that were developed as part of this capacity development project. So what you're going to see is, starting from phase 0, the community engagement process, and moving through the design and development. Currently, we're about 40% away, 50% of the way with the design of El Ajoche. So you're going to start with a couple of slides here that are going to show what we did when we were down in the area working with the families, and then we're going to move into some of the design work that's happening right now. So this first slide here is showing 2 of the exercises and games that we engage in. We use exercises and games to get past language barriers and to make sure that there's no right answer to the questions that we're asking, so we're getting unfettered opinion. The idea is to learn and to teach. So we're learning what the villagers' priorities are. We're learning what their concerns are. We're learning what their hopes are, what their dreams are, and what they don't care about. At the same time, we're teaching. The communities that we work with oftentimes haven't had an opportunity to engage in long-term planning. They haven't had the security. They haven't had the assets to do so. So the idea of planning for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road is something that is foreign. So we design our exercises to ask them to think about what's going to happen next, what's going to happen in 5 years, what's going to happen in 10 years. What happens if you do something different first? Will that affect the outcome? We also design the exercises to start to engender a sense of ownership by listening much more than we talk, and by asking them to drive the bus, essentially. We start to change the conversation from our village to their village, so that by the end of the process, ideally, they're telling us what they have designed. So what you see here is, on the left, we have a voting game where we ask people to vote on very specific choices. And on the right, we have a village layout exercise where we've asked the community to essentially start designing the village on the floor. Where are you going to put your lots? Where are you going to put your roads? What do you need in a village? Where are you going to put it? How are you going to put it there? Do you want it first, second, third? Is it important? And so on the next slide, what you see is the tabulation of that information. So on the left-hand side, you can see that we've gone through all those voting sheets and said, well, okay, people very much want their kitchens outside. They want their houses close to the road. They want a roof with 2 sides. They're not into shed roofs. And so we compile this information to help us design the lots and the layouts. Still on the left-hand side on the right, you can see we did a voting game where the community was asked to, it was actually a buying game. The community was given a limited amount of chips and asked to buy the amenities that they wanted on their lot. That way we can find out what is the most important thing for the community to have. A place to sleep, potable water, and a latrine. Simple, but extremely important to know that that is the things that the community considers the most important. On the right-hand slide, it's similar exercises, but on a village scale. So we again did a buying exercise where they give a limited amount of chips and said, all right, what would you buy first? A clinic, a school, a preschool, a park? And by asking them that in phased turns, we can find out what the community wants and how much are they willing to commit for it. So you see some of the layouts the community came in and some of the phased ways that they did it. This led directly into the creation of two designs. We took the feedback that we got from the village and created two designs for the same space that illustrated differing points. So the design on the left shows larger lots with a centrally located civic space, but we would need to put some lots farther away in a different site because there's not enough room. The design on the right shows smaller lots, but all the lots can fit into one area. So the villagers are asked, well, which one do you prefer? And the way we do that is we give them the designs and we divide them into teams and ask them to present to each other and then vote, argue, switch up, so that by the end of the day, they're arguing for their design, not arguing for our design. In this particular situation, we had the opportunity, or the community had the opportunity to not only present to themselves. I'm going to flip to the next one. So on the left, this is the community kind of presenting to themselves and arguing, and wonderfully they came up with kind of a third option here. But they also got the opportunity to present to the board who was down there on this trip at this time. So moving on from there, what you're going to see from now on is kind of a series of designs that we're working on currently, and we're working closely with the office in Nicaragua. And this is all based on the information that we pulled while working with communities on site. So on the left is the whole farm map, and you'll see the dashed area indicates the place for the village itself. And on the right is a blow-up of that, again showing two separate areas. The one on the right is kind of the main area with housing and the civic structures. The one on the left is all housing. They're separated by about 5 minutes. So in this particular case, the community at El Hoche said, we would prefer larger lots, and we're willing to be separated if it's only by 5 minutes. That wasn't a problem for them. So on the next slide, at this point, we backed up and we said, okay, now that we know where we're going to put the housing, let's analyze that so that we can add more information into the design. So we did climactic analysis, and then on the following slide, we did a more detailed site analysis. Where are the drainages? What is the solar path? Where are the steep slopes? Where are the existing buildings? Where is the access from? Are there water sources that we need to protect? So that we can kind of add another layer of information onto the design that we're doing. So this next page, the left-hand slide is the main area, and the right-hand slide is the smaller housing area. And so this is more information getting layered on. This is essentially the same design that we worked with down in the community, but now we're adding more detail to it. Where are the roads? Where exactly is the school? Where would the preschool go? Are we reusing existing buildings for civic functions? Are all the roads the same size? Do we have walking paths? Where does the drainage go? The kind of information that you really need to make a farm into a village. So this one here is just a color-coded version of these that we're doing for the municipality to let them know exactly how much area we're reserving for spring protection and other things like that. And then the following slide is kind of the layers of information that we have on there. So the drainage, the landscape and wind protection, housing, civic functions, and then how they all relate together. And on the last sheet we have here is kind of the next level of detail we get in. So it's site drainage, latrine placement, loading and sizing, and then the bottom two slides are the housing designs that Harold has been working with us closely on. And I believe this is the final approved design. So.
Excellent. Thank you, Geoff. We'll hand off the mic to our last presenter now, Karen Weber, who's going to share a story. We've been talking a lot about preparations and our sort of vision for this regional project, and Karen got to visit a community that really shows really where these villagers can go with our work and sort of what they can achieve, what our vision is when it's realized. So I will hand things off to Karen, and you can get to know her a little better.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everybody. My husband and I, as stated earlier, have been involved with Agros for about 16 years, and Mark's been serving on the board for the last few years. Back in 2007, we had an opportunity to go to our first visit together to Nicaragua, and it was there that I became just amazed at what I saw from visiting a group that was applying to be a village, a group that had been on their land for a short time and were just beginning to build houses, and a group that was already well underway. That was actually El Aden, and I was just so impressed with how the model developed over time, and have been an advocate ever since in a really big way. This year, when they had the opportunity to invite the spouses to attend the board meeting in Nicaragua as well, I was eager to go to see what was happening that was new. The picture that you see there is Mark and me, and we are standing on the regional project land. So this was the last place that we had visited. We got to meet with the folks that were preparing to move on, as those people were pictured earlier. But prior to this, the day before and this morning that this picture was taken, we had the opportunity to visit Tierra Nueva, which is the mega village of 150 families. While the board members were in their meeting, the spouses gathered here in the school to listen to first Alba Mara, who's the trainer there in the center, and then to hear from the villagers themselves about what kinds of things they've been engaging in, having learned from Alba Mara. What was really amazing to me about Tierra Nueva is that in a relatively short amount of time, this village has become productive and thriving in a more deep and certainly a more quick way than ever before. So building, as everyone has said, upon what we've learned in earlier villages in the smaller models, this has worked very, very well. So what I witnessed here that particularly excited me was the participation level of all the villagers. From the youngest, the students had presented earlier, and on the back wall there were some pictures of the old school and the new school, and they were able to tell us about that and what an exciting thing it was for them. And we learned that 100% of the students of the children in the village who are eligible are enrolled in school. So to me as an educator, that was really gratifying to know they're all so excited about their education. This is really an example of what happens when basic needs are met. These families have food, they're growing food, they're healthy, they've got nutrition, they have their pure water, they have housing, their families are safe and secure. There is a health program going on, and the agronomists are working with everyone to support it. So the village is really working well in that. So the folks that are gathered here wanted to tell us about the next level that they're able to participate in now that their basic needs are met. And they were talking about how they are involved now in growth groups where women meet with some women and men meet with some men to discuss deeper engagement of human relationships, their own personal development, their communication skills, negotiation skills. And several people stood up to tell us. There was a man who said he'd been working on his relationship with his wife because of what he's learned, and also looking forward to engaging better with his two small daughters who were there in attendance. Another man shared about being able to negotiate with neighbors when they have a disagreement, that they've learned ways to arbitrate and talk things out and communicate. They all thanked Albamara profusely and were admiring of her, of course, as their trainer. It was really exciting to see the relationships there. But the thing that intrigued me, and when we had an opportunity to respond, I couldn't help but point out the woman sitting across the way had stood and talked about herself as a woman and feeling so respected and that she was really part of the community and was so excited about it. She stood there telling us about this, and I was looking at her shirt and wondering, I wonder if she knows what that means. And so I had the translator on board with me to figure it out. And what I told her when I had a chance to talk was that what I really want to do is write the word poverty on her shirt. Poverty, so over it. La pobreza es en el pasado. Poverty's in the past. And everyone cheered and clapped because they are putting poverty in the past. The generational poverty is behind. And so it's so exciting to see the Agros model, how it has grown from the small villages and now expanding into the larger ones. And to me, the comprehensive nature and the actual witnessing of what's happening there, that it is effective and these folks are being lifted out of poverty once and for all, is really meaningful to me as a donor, as a supporter, as a friend. So I'm excited.
Thank you, Karen. So that concludes, just a few minutes late, the presentation here. And right now we'll jump right away into question and answer so that you have time to get all your questions answered. I know Krista had a question earlier in the chat. So Krista, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you if you want to say your question out loud. And this might be a good one for Farless, actually. So I'll unmute you now. Krista, are you there?
Hello.
Hi.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. I just had a question in terms of kind of going back to the progression of the larger model. By the way, thank you so much for doing all of this and presenting it for us. I'm curious how kind of the growth is also then going to be staffed and how the staff is growing both within the country and or, here in Seattle. But how do you support these larger communities and villages?
Okay, so there is like a couple questions there, right? So how did the capacity development happen with the growth with the staff? Well, there are a couple things. It was a long, kind of painful process for us because it was looking within and taking a look at the model and then taking a look at what really works and what wasn't quite working for us and trying to improve it. And then in terms of the staff, just, because of it, we have a new system of who we hire and how they get hired. And the feedback that we're getting is that our staff is the best staff that we have ever had so far. Every partner that we have that have visited the field have said that they're extremely qualified, that they're very good at their jobs, that they're passionate, committed, and it's just, we're very, very excited about our team. The other thing that's happening is that even people that used to work for us before, or people that, have been with us longer, they're getting retrained on all of our new models. We're learning new things about agriculture. We're learning new things about health and community development. And so we're growing every single day as staff members and as part of this team. And how are we getting prepared to serve bigger communities? Was that the other piece of your question?
Yeah, like what do you anticipate it looking like for these larger modeled communities in terms of staffing?
Well, we have larger teams now because we have to serve more families. So for the regional team, for example, now we have every agronomist serves around 50 families, which is brand new for us, and so that means that the methodology has to change. But we're anticipating teams that cooperate more. So in the past, for example, agronomy and economic development haven't talked too much. Now we know that they need to talk a lot and they need to collaborate all the time. So now our economic development team sits all the time with our financial services team, and they decide on the type of investments that we're going to do and the type of credits that we're going to make. The same thing for economic development and health. they're collaborating, for example, in nutrition. So all of the crops that we are planting this season, for example, have to do with both food security, but also with the intention of creating diets that are more balanced for all of the families. So I think that we're growing in terms of staff members, but also in terms of the complexity of how we work with each other.
And I would just say that the overall intention of some of the things that we've done in terms of expanding is to get more leverage from the staff that we have. So it takes the same amount of staff in some ways to deal with some of the smaller villages. And then as we get into a larger and more expanded model, the idea is that there's a lot more reinforcing aspects of the staffing so that we're not having to reproduce staff just to produce that level of scale. So it's a more efficient approach than we've had in the past.
Great question, Krista.
Thank you. I just have one follow-up, if I could be so, to hog a little more time. Just in terms of that, I'm wondering if, as these expand, because what I appreciate hearing about, like the conversations that involved the families there in terms of developing how the house would be built. How, I guess I'm wondering if we're seeing that the families who have been a part or really invested could be part of kind of taking that leadership. So it doesn't necessarily require staff as much as you really are enabling and empowering the families to help cultivate that within the community.
Yes, I mean, like the community now has a brand new elected board, for example, and it's the fastest a board has been formed. So they're developing their own leadership. They have decided on a new name for the community. They have decided on the structure of how their board is going to govern decision making. So, and this is actually pretty incredible because if you think about, not all of the families have moved into the land yet. So for a community to come together and make some significant decisions, even though they're not living together yet, it speaks volumes of this community and how they're being structured. So we're very, very excited about the future for these families.
And I would just say that a big focus is leadership development. So I hear all the time is leadership development in terms of any community development work. That's just the legacy, is not just the direct support, the things that are so tangible, but some of the intangibles in the human beings that are there and the things that they see and believe and experience in themselves that they can then carry on for the rest of their lives. That's the real power of the story, is in the people and what they become as they experience themselves having this transformation as they go through it.
And they are bestowing that upon the children as well, encouraging them to step up. We met El Presidente, he was 14 years old. I wish I had a picture of him because he was so handsome and so excited to be there and spoke confidently among his peers to all of us as though it were just an everyday thing he does. And the other students as well who spoke to us, it's being cultivated in the generations that are coming up.
We have another.
Wonderful, very.
Thanks, Krista. I have another question that just came in from Brad Smith that I'm going to read out loud on his behalf. Brad asked, how will you select families to serve in the region who do not live on the property, and what services will be available to them? I'm going to hand this one off to Farlis again.
So the regional families are families, well, what we have decided is, as the staff members, that we're going to call them Regional Families La Bendición, because that's a new name for El Ojoche and Aguas Vivas families. And so regional families are all families that they own their own land, but they're small producers. So families that have from like half a manzana all the way up to 5 manzanas. And they live in smaller communities close to El Ojoche right now. And they have their own families and their own houses and most of what they need. What we realize is that they need a lot of technical support. So in order for us to have a greater impact in the region. So we do, all of our field schools are geared towards regional families, and so we have those in some of the communities that are already established. We are also doing some of our health work with them right now, and we're going to do a little bit of infrastructure, not a ton, but a little bit. It has to do mostly with like building flooring for the houses, because we know that has a significant impact in health. We're going to do some of the improved stoves, because that will help us with reducing respiratory diseases. We're going to do some work with latrines because of sanitation issues. So there is a few of the things that, even though we're not going to put all of our infrastructure behind those families, all of our work at the regional level in terms of technical support, health, financial services looks pretty much the same that it will look in our community. So the only difference is infrastructure when we compare regional families to the families that live in our property.
Great. Did that answer your question, Brad? Feel free to type in if you want to expand, or if anyone else has a question. We don't have anything at the moment. Great. Brad says thank you. Anyone else? We've got a few minutes left with our presenters. All right. Then at this point, we can wrap things up. Thank you so much for being here with us. And if you have any feedback about the webinar, we'd love to hear it. You could send us a quick note at donor.services@agros.org and let us know what you thought and how we can